Hello again, everyone. Edwin Learnard back once again. In this YouTube astrological segment, I'm going to be talking about what I believe annoys Taurus, and yes, this does apply and pertain to the Sun, Moon, and Ascendant. Anyway, first thing up is one thing that I think that really annoys Taurus, and I could speak personally on this because I have Taurus rising, is when somebody tries to rush them to do something. Taurus does not want to become frantic or panic-stricken or be put in rush mode by anybody. Taurus wants to work hard and laboriously, but also in a very methodical and deliberate manner. Another thing about Taurus too is that don't confuse stolidness and slow moving with stupidity. Taurus can be very deliberate and can go at a really steady but slow pace, but it doesn't equate to being slow, as far as being stupid goes. And I think that's another thing that could annoy Taurus, is when people misconstrue them as far as that goes. Next thing is, well, Taurus can also get annoyed. If someone tries to get them to do something based on spontaneity and something that wasn't planned or premeditated. Now, this may have something to do with the fact that Aries often falls on the 12th house cusp in a solar or natal chart for Taurus. I think another thing that can annoy Taurus rather strongly is when someone tries to coax or cajole them to go anywhere, whether it's on a long distance trip or whether it is just a trip in their local community. Now, I think a lot of this has to do with the fact, as far as a long distance trip, say traveling abroad, Capricorn, it often falls on the 9th house cusp of long journeys and traveling abroad for Taurus in a solar or natal chart. And Capricorn, of course, is about restriction and limitations. And the thing about this is, and it could be where Capricorn falls on a house cusp in a natal chart, could be where one is averse to and tries to evade. So I have Capricorn on my 9th house cusp in my natal chart. And another thing is, as far as the short journeys go, well, Cancer often falls on the 3rd house cusp in a solar or natal chart for Taurus. And Cancer is the sign associated with home. So I think Taurus generally does not like to be that mobile or even really in general take many short journeys. And I think a lot of that is attributed to Cancer being on that 3rd house cusp. Cancer being the sign, of course, associated with home and family. And I think that's part of the reason what makes why Taurus can often be a homebody and really doesn't really venture far out from their home in many cases. And anyway, the next in given that, the only in times when Taurus might go on short journeys, I'm gonna get back to that momentarily, is might be when it is something family related. But I think a lot of times the home plays a role maybe in their family life to really in them maybe not venturing out too much and just and really staying home a lot as opposed to venturing out on short journeys. So anyway, next thing up is, well, another thing that can annoy Taurus very strongly, I believe, is that when people are being overly manipulative, mischievous, and surreptitious. Now, Scorpio is the opposite sign of Taurus, of course, and Scorpio falls on the 7th house cusp in a solar or natal chart for Taurus. And I think this could be why Taurus is really strongly opposed to this, more so, I believe, than the other zodiac signs. Now, this may also have something to do with the fact why Taurus may often be averse to making a major change or transformation in their life, because Scorpio is the sign of transformation and it is the opposite sign of Taurus. So Taurus really can have an anathema to that, whereas Scorpio is more about sometimes even creating crisis, and they don't know a lot of times what to do if they don't make a major change in their life. Taurus will strongly avoid this very often. So anyway, another thing too is as far as what might strongly annoy Taurus, well, I think too is really overly pushy people. That is something people that are exceptionally pushy can really exasperate Taurus, and this goes back, I think, to the fact that Aries often falls on that 12th house cusp of limitations and restrictions for Taurus as far as the solar or natal chart goes. Now, and Aries is the sign that epitomizes, I think, being really pushy. So, anyway. Another thing is that Taurus really is strongly, what really can annoy Taurus, I think, is simply loud and boisterous people. Taurus often wants their quiet, they want their peace and tranquility, and people that are overly loud and boisterous and really just making a lot of racket, really it could be something that Taurus can get agitated with. And I mean, I think this has a lot to do with the fact that Leo is a zodiac sign that squares Taurus, and Leo is often very gregarious and very loud and can be boisterous. They're a lot more louder in their nature than Taurus is, of course, and I believe this has something to do with this. Now, another thing is that Taurus also can be very sensitive to noise in general, and I think things that are just very noisy are really is something that could annoy Taurus strongly, and Taurus could be very averse to. Keep in mind, going back to the zodiac sign Cancer, often being on the 3rd house cusp in a solar or natal chart for Taurus, I think has a lot to do with this. It's sensitivity in all matters with communication, and even when they have to hear something, that really is something I think that could be very irksome to Taurus. I mean, as I stated before, Taurus rising, and I just don't like hearing really a lot of loud noise, and I mean, I just like to have things very quiet and very peaceful often. So anyway. Well, another thing too is as far as what could annoy Taurus is that they could be very averse to a combative and contentious situation. And this goes back to Aries often being on the 12th house cusp in a solar or natal chart for Taurus. Taurus is a sign that is often about their peace, their tranquility. They generally don't like to make waves. They like to just kind of be passive and enjoy the quiet and be in an area where they don't have to worry about strife or discord. So I think with Taurus, I mean, they are ones that really like to have things where they don't have an angry situation or acrimony, and those, I mean, that is something that can really strongly annoy the zodiac sign Taurus. And another thing is that I think too with Taurus as well is another thing is that just subtle behavior or people talking what I refer to as subtleties, making subtle references is something that can really agitate Taurus, and I think a lot of this has to do with Scorpio being the opposite sign of Taurus. I mean, Taurus may not be as outspoken as Aries say, but they can be just when they state something, it's often in a very flat manner, and it's not done in a subtle way. Now, and I think what it is I mean, Taurus just doesn't like, the subtle things that people might say, such as when someone makes a statement that might be a reference to Taurus, but they use someone else's name instead of theirs. Taurus would rather hear it being stated with their name as opposed to plain name substitution, so to speak. So anyway, and as I stated before about Taurus can be annoyed and agitated at volatile and acrimonious situations, and that goes back to the Aries often being on that 12th house cusp in a solar or natal chart for Taurus. And the thing about this is that Taurus, what's interesting, I mean, they actually will stay, I believe, maybe more so than the other zodiac signs, in a relationship that could be detrimental to them for a more prolonged and protracted period than other signs. A lot of this, I think, is attributed to perhaps Taurus's near unprecedented loyalty and steadfastness in a relationship. Now, the thing about this, though, the thing which will really break the straw that will break the camel's back for Taurus, and Taurus will not just get annoyed, but very agitated, if a relationship gets to a point where they're succumbing to some kind of emotional and or physical abuse. I think Taurus then draws the line because they just don't like to have strong contentious situations, and that is generally, of course, in relationships. So and the thing about it is, don't get me wrong, Taurus will fight if backed into a corner, but they generally aren't ones that are about confrontation and are generally not going to be going around looking for trouble with others. And the thing about it is, and also keep in mind that when Taurus leaves a relationship, it is generally for good and no turning back. They stay really in the relation. What they do is they stay in a relationship with a lot of persistence, but when they leave, it's done in the same manner with a lot of persistence. They stay loyalty to their decisions, whether they're staying in a relationship or they're leaving and extricating themselves, so to speak, from an adverse or negative one. What's interesting is that many of you may have heard of a legendary country music singer, Glenn Campbell. He had a Taurus sun and Taurus moon, and he sang a song one time called something like "By the Time I Get to Phoenix," and in the song he talks about how he left a woman, and the thing about it is, he says something like, "She just didn't know I would really go," and it's funny, in the song he describes how he left, but he obviously left very quietly and in a surreptitious manner. You think about it, he had Scorpio rising, so I think that flavored that Taurus energy in the song, so to speak. And I've talked about this before. Now, as far as I think celebrity, like actors and actresses, can often be drawn to roles, at least on a subconscious level, that correspond with their astrological energies. Well, I think singers are no different in the sense that they could be drawn towards singing songs that reflect something strongly associated with their astrological energies. I think Glenn Campbell was no exception in that case. And another thing, going back to another thing that may annoy Taurus, is that I think don't misconstrue Taurus's good disposition for weakness. Taurus is generally passive and peace-loving, but certainly not weak. And the thing about it, last but not least, the thing that might very strongly annoy Taurus is that if you try to get them to deviate from their general routine and breaking their so-called monotony and state of being, that is something that can annoy Taurus very strongly. Taurus really likes to be Mr. or Mrs. Consistency and doing the same thing often on a day-to-day basis, and I should know about that, having Taurus rising. So anyway, people, that'll conclude this YouTube astrological segment for what annoys Taurus. Stay tuned next time where I'll be talking about what annoys Gemini. Two things I want to get with you on before I head out. Firstly, the stars may impel but do not compel. And secondly, never isolate any single astrological element, aspect, planetary placement, position, configuration, influence, or what have you, and make an analysis of a person, astrologically speaking, based on this alone. Because astrologically speaking, the person is the sum of all their components in their natal chart and not just one. Until next time, people, stay well.